Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk. The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by the people of America's oil and natural gas industry. Learn more at energytomorrow.org. And by CIT, Capital Redefined. And by SAP, software for great companies, not just great big companies. Learn more at sap.com/midsize.
Issue 1, Iraq Common Ground.
Setting a deadline for withdrawal is setting a date for failure.
President Bush followed through on his promise. He vetoed the Democratic bill demanding that U.S. troops begin evacuating Iraq in 5 months. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, Mr. Bush summoned congressional leaders of both chambers and both parties to the White House to confer on how to break the deadlock. The meeting was fruitful.
Yesterday was a day that highlighted differences. Today's a day where we can work together to find common ground.
The Republicans committed themselves to the task.
I think there's a way for us to work together to try to find common ground. That's what the American people expect of us.
So did the Democrats.
We owe it to the American people to find our common ground, the right approach to coming together to find our common ground. We must strive to find that common ground.
Even Senate Democratic Majority Leader Harry Reid, the harshest critic of the president's Iraq policy, was conciliatory.
It's not going to be easy, but it's important. And I said to the president that it's very clear that the #1 issue is Iraq. That's our message to the president. We want to work with him and his people, and we will do that to the best of our ability.
And despite the ongoing Iraq acrimony, the president still seems upbeat.
I'm confident that we can reach agreement. But I know that it's going to require goodwill, but we all care deeply about our country and care about this issue.
Question, why didn't the Republicans and the Democrats reach common ground during all those weeks of argument before the veto? Pat Buchanan.
Because there is fundamental disagreement on this war in Iraq, John. The Democratic Party wants to set a deadline to begin to withdraw in October and everybody out by April. Any deadline is intolerable to the president. He said he would veto it. The Democratic Party wanted to tell its base that we believe in getting out by then and we're going to vote for it. So both sides went through this. The common ground now, however, is going to be Pelosi and Reid and the Congress are going to capitulate. They're going to give the president his $100 billion, and they may tie something like $5 billion in foreign aid to performance benchmarks, so to speak. But the president's going to win this battle, but other battles are coming down the road.
Did the Democrats insist on the veto in order to establish a clear line of demarcation whereby now this war is totally and undisputedly owned by President Bush?
Well, the Democrats are in power because they oppose the war. And you talk about the Democrats capitulating. They're going to take the timeline out. Nancy Pelosi has been clear from the start that the Democrats, that the troops are going to get the money, but the president is going to have to give in on benchmarks or something. And the president may be winning the battle from your point of view, but he's still losing the war. And there are plenty more legislative vehicles ahead, and these votes are going to get tougher for the Republicans to take on Capitol Hill, and you're going to start seeing Republicans start to flip unless things turn around dramatically on the ground in Iraq, and that looks like an impossibility.
What I thought was really interesting was,
go ahead.
Was that during the debate last night, so many of the Republican potential candidates spoke on the assumption that the way the war in Iraq has been conducted has been a mistake.
What are the terms of the common ground?
Well, I mean, I think Eleanor described it. They're going to turn the timeline into benchmarks. Pat described correctly. as we're all hearing it, that the penalty for not hitting the benchmarks will be taking $5 billion out of the civilian foreign aid to the Iraqi government. I'm not completely convinced that it's going to be as easy to get to an agreement as they say, because Pelosi will be losing a fair number of anti-war Democrats in the House if they take the teeth out, and Bush won't vote for a bill that's got real teeth in.
Who's going to certify the reaching of the benchmarks?
No, it's going to be Bush having to certify, Bush having to go back to Congress if he's violating.
They won't take Bush's word for it.
No. This is all.
What about the independent study group?
You misunderstand. They want Bush to confess that he hasn't hit the benchmarks, and if he confesses that he hasn't, in order to be able to keep getting the money, then the Democrats win their little political.
Suppose Bush says we reached the benchmarks.
What the Congress?
How are you going to certify
What
that?
the Congress is going to do probably is to insert some sort of provision that there has to be an independent study group. Bring back the Iraq Study Group, the Baker-Hamilton Commission, some bipartisan group, to determine in September whether the surge is working or not working. Okay. And when that group comes back and says, okay, there's some progress, but not enough, that's when you're going to see the president have to reassess.
Moving the goalposts.
Only 8 months ago, the president insisted that the outcome in Iraq would be a victory and nothing less.
Victory in Iraq will be a crushing defeat to our enemies who have staked so much on the battle there. And victory in Iraq would be a powerful triumph in the ideological struggle of the 21st century. From Damascus to Tehran, people will look to a democratic Iraq as inspiration that freedom can succeed in the Middle East, and as evidence that the side of freedom is the winning side.
In the 8 months since that utterance, victory morphed into success, and success morphed into this.
Either we'll succeed or we won't succeed. And the definition of success, as I described, is, sectarian violence down. Success is not no violence. There are parts of our own country that, have got, a certain level of violence to it. But success is a level of violence where the people feel comfortable about living their daily lives. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
So there will be a quantum of violence. Will the moving of the goalposts work, Eleanor Clinton?
Well, that's a pathetic rationale for staying. I must say, what happened at Virginia Tech, that happens probably 3 times a day in Iraq. And so to compare Iraq to the level of violence in this country, it's ludicrous. But the president is moving the goalposts, and we don't hear him trumpeting freedom and democracy. If you're looking at Iraq as what freedom is all about, it's enough to give freedom a bad name.
Maybe he's talking about inner city homicide. No. If he is, the ratio is about 100 to 1 favoring Iraq.
Look, I mean, there's no doubt that you're broadly correct that they have been less triumphal in their discussion of what success is going to be. But you've also cherry-picked a little bit, because for months and months he has said that you can't expect to see the end of violence. So it's not new to say the end of violence, but I agree with you that the loftier parts of it are not being talked about as much.
But the big goal, John, you know what it was? It was a free, democratic, peaceful, united Iraq, which was going to be not only an example but a magnet to Iran and to Syria and all of this. That has gone by the boards. The great democratic revolution is over. The president would like to get out with something standing where the level of violence is tolerable and the government survives. You're right, it is a great climb down.
You think he's going to be able to reach a point where the level of violence will be such that he can declare truthfully mission accomplished?
I believe that the surge is going to work in part in the president in September. I believe he's got to start bringing the troops home or they will lose.
Well, he now has wiggle room, does he not? Okay, détente abroad.
No.
The Syrian foreign minister and I had a chance on the margins of this meeting to talk about the need to stabilize Iraq.
In Egypt this week, at a huge 2-day international conference on the future of Iraq, Condoleezza Rice held a 30-minute talk with the Syrian foreign minister. It was the first high-level meeting since the U.S. withdrew its ambassador from Damascus in February '05, 26 months ago. And at the same Sharm el-Sheikh assemblage, Secretary Rice also broke the ice between the United States and Iran. Like her boss, Condoleezza Rice is learning how to play a weaker U.S. hand. Mr. Bush with the Democrats and his Secretary of State abroad, both striking a less unilateralist tone.
So there was rapprochement all over the place this week between the Democrats and the Republicans, and abroad between the United States and Syria, and a little bit toward the United States and Iran. What do you make of it?
Well, I think you're right that what the presidency is trying to do, and I think what Condoleezza Rice is doing, is really smart right now. If you want to think of the Bush presidency like an investor, they bet all their foreign policy on one stock, Iraq, and that is going desperately wrong. Now they're doing something which is really smart, which is diversifying their portfolio. Starting to talk to lots of different countries, and that at least gives them a chance. This is what they should have been doing all along.
Let us talk for a minute, will you?
But it does, your initial question was, is this going to be what the Bush legacy going forward depends on? And I think if they can have some successes, then yeah, then Bush won't be seen purely as the president who lost Iraq.
Christian, as you looked at the debate last night and that lineup, did you see any of this détente, this mood, this atmospheric, this reality gushing forward from any of those candidates?
Well, what I did see was a realization that the Iraq policy isn't working.
Exit question. In retrospect, will the first week of May 2007 be seen, in retrospect, as the major turning point in Bush's approach to the Iraq war? Yes or no?
No, I think the major turning point is going to come after a lot more troubles from the Congress, and it's going to come, I believe, in September when Petraeus comes back and tells us whether the surge has worked. I believe at that point the president's going to make a major decision.
You don't see this as a movement away from a military strategy to a diplomatic strategy?
It's the beginning of the Democratic squeeze on the president, but he's still stubborn enough to take down his party with him, and I think he's still holding out. I agree with Pat that the September is the break point, and the president is going to have an awfully hard time continuing if the verdict is the surge doesn't work. And remember what the surge is for. It's to give the Maliki government an opportunity to perform. The Maliki government is incapable of performing.
Do you sense something going on in Ronald Reagan and George Bush, namely that there is a shift that has taken place?
No, and if I'd had
he's given up on the military strategy.
No, if I can answer just for a couple of seconds. No, there's no diplomacy. There's a Potemkin diplomacy going on both by the Syrians and by us, because the Syrians don't want to help us solve this problem. But Potemkin finding common ground between the Republicans and the Democrats, because the Democrats don't want to see the president succeed. And so this is all phoniness, and some people get sucked in to think that there's really a diplomatic solution and that the Democrats in Congress and the president can really get together. They can't. There's going to, and Ellen is right on this, there's going to be a crash in September between the president, the Democrats, and the Syrian and Iranian, to the extent there is any diplomacy, will amount to nothing.
It amazes
because
me.
It's in their interest, in Iran and Syria's interest, to defeat us,
Tony
not to help
does not
us.
see the logic of anyone compromising.
Well, the crash is
you understand that's part of his mentality.
Republicans.
But there are elements of compromise that really jigger the imagination and jigger reality and jigger movement. And there's self-interest on both sides, and you can cut deals. Isn't that true with Syria?
Well, I think what you're beginning to see is conversation and dialogue, and that is the beginning of a shift. But I agree with Eleanor and Pat that there's going to be more of a shift.
So you don't see a fundamental change in Bush's outlook at this point?
I see the beginning.
It's all optics, but optics are somewhat important, but nothing substantive happened in Sharm el-Sheikh.
My view is that it is not all optics. I believe that there is real movement in the president's thinking. When we come back, who showed best among the Republicans? Presidential contenders this week.
It fuels our lives and creates the products we depend on. It powers our workforce. It brings us home and gives us warmth. It lets us travel the earth and reach for the sky. Vital for life, too precious to waste. Oil and natural gas. Together, let's use it wisely. Learn more at energytomorrow.org.
I've been hearing that SAP has business software for mid-sized companies. So naturally, I did what you'd expect. Had my hearing tested. Turns out I'm fine.
Any global accounting organization needs to keep a sharp eye on the financial environment. Listen carefully to your needs and goals, and think long and hard about your business. But what distinguishes the accountants at Grant Thornton is their passion for the business of accounting. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting.
I lost my job and my health insurance. The first thought was, how am I going to get my medication I need? I was in a lot of trouble.
If you're uninsured and struggling, America's pharmaceutical companies want to help. Call 1-888-4PPA now to see if you may qualify.
PPA saves me $1,300 a month.
We've been to nearly 1,000 cities in all 50 states, helping more than 3 million people in need.
Without my wife and PPA, I don't know if I could have been here today.
The Partnership for Prescription Assistance, on the road to helping you.
Issue 2, Reagan Republicans. 10 Republican presidential hopefuls convened at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California on Thursday night. Ronald Reagan's name was invoked 19 separate times by the GOP lineup, each trying to draw close to Reagan's stature.
Ronald Reagan did was to give us a vision for this country, a morning in America, sitting on a hill.
And the great thing about Ronald Reagan was he was a uniter.
Ronald Reagan used to say we spend money like a drunken sailor. I received an email recently from a guy who said, as a former drunken sailor, I resent being compared to members of Congress.
Question, was it cruel to hold the first Republican debate at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library? Pat Buchanan.
No, it was not, John. It was a very nice gesture. Mrs. Reagan was there. It was a great place. Reagan is the great hero of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. But who won the debate, John? Let me tell you. I think Governor Romney, Mitt Romney, really helped himself in his first major public appearance. He was personable, he was articulate, had good humor, and he handled himself extremely well. And Rudy Giuliani stepped into that minefield on abortion, and he did not appear like Mr. 9/11 up there on that stage. So among the big three, I think Romney goes up, Giuliani goes down, and McCain had trouble.
This was like the Gong Show. I mean, these guys are so out of touch with America. One person, Rudy Giuliani, expressed some hesitation about overturning Roe v. Wade, which is abortion rights in this country. You think that's going to be a winning position
I think
in
it's
a
a
general
loser.
election?
He ain't going to get to the general with that
well,
one.
and secondly, 3 of them don't believe in evolution. This was
Four.
really...
Four.
Okay, counting Pat, we got 4.
Buchanan ought to know this better than anybody, that Ronald Reagan, through Lee Atwater and others, spoke about the Big Tent. What we saw here was a narrow orthodoxy. And Eleanor is right, which had very little contact with the American people.
Talking about a narrow orthodoxy, the idea that the Republicans are out of contact with Eleanor Cleff's view of the world hardly means they're out of contact with the general electorate.
Well, that's a nice little remark.
But, well,
where are you going with it? Quickly.
But I was going to say that for most of them, standing under the wings of Reagan's Air Force One is probably as close as they're going to get to flying on the real thing.
And I'll match my views on evolution up against the broader
I agree with
America.
you on evolution, but I'm talking about taxation, I'm talking about fighting terrorism, I'm talking about fighting Iran if necessary to stop nuclear weapons. Believe me, your little cult of
those were not the issues that dominated.
You think the younger generation drew any comfort from these gentlemen that they saw on the stage with their narrow orthodoxy?
I think that's a really good question, and I think that's one of the things that we're seeing with Barack Obama is a real generational divide.
Did you also see in the way they responded to those internet questions that were put to them, how they dismissed them and went into their, frequently went into their prepared canned speeches?
Absolutely, and the internet questions were unexpected. They were hard.
They were also stupid.
And that's the younger generation.
Well, maybe
remarkably stupid questions.
Some of them were very
Tell me why you hate America. How's that?
You can't call your voters stupid if you want them to vote for you.
Well, these were set-up questions by Politico. They picked the ones that were ridiculous. Tell me how you hate America.
You're saying that Romney's performance was the strongest. You're saying what?
No, I don't think any of them distinguished distinguish themselves. Actually, the second most prevalent person on the stage next to Ronald Reagan was Hillary Clinton. It's the only thing that unifies this party.
That's because they were asked a question about her husband coming back to the White House.
She came up several times.
She's a great unifier.
That's right.
Look, let's be fair just for a second. In these kind of debates, whether it was the Democrats last week or the Republicans this week, most people are not terribly impressive. They have 30 seconds to try to say something, and the panel we saw last week in the Democratic primary were no more impressive than this panel. But I agree with you, and I agree that Mitt Romney did the best. I don't think anybody was particularly advanced or hurt by this debate.
What do you think of the three Republicans who raised their hands, said that they don't believe in evolution?
I think it's
Tancredo, Gilmore. Who was the third?
No, it's Huckabee, I'm sure, and Brownback, wouldn't it?
Brownback was up there?
Yeah,
what is that? I think you don't believe in evolution?
I think it's very worrying for America in a globalized economy where you need to have real cutting-edge
I mean, the problem of believing in God is a problem now in the global economy?
No, not believing in science is a
Exit
problem.
question. Last week we saw the Democratic lineup in debate. This week we saw the Republican lineup. Which lineup is the more interesting?
Barack Obama is very interesting in the Democrats.
So
but
it's
he's
the Democratic lineup.
No. I think Romney and Giuliani are interesting because they're all three new. So I'd say they're about evenly interesting.
Romney's answer on stem cell research, trying to wiggle off the fact that he opposes embryonic stem cell research, is going to be another loser for him in the general election. He is too slick by half. But in terms of interest, it's going to be fascinating to see if the Republicans can find a candidate here who matches up with their base and who can get elected in this country. Challenge.
I think Gravel and Kucinich and Dodd and Biden were an inspirational panel to be the next president of the United States.
That's only half
Who was the most formidable last night?
I think Romney had a good night. I still
What
think.
about McCain? No one's mentioning McCain.
I don't think he's going to win in the end. And I think
McCain was
although Giuliani had a difficult time on the abortion issue, I still find him formidable and impressive.
What do you think, Christian?
I think the fact that you have a woman and a black man as serious contenders for the American presidency is the most interesting. But New York is fascinated by Mike Bloomberg and whether he's going to run or not.
Oh, brother.
I would say the best performance last night was rendered seriously by Ron Paul. Issue 3, Beleaguered Wolfowitz.
I had a chance on Monday to give my full explanation to the board, and it's available to all of you if you want to read it. We need to follow due process.
World Bank President Paul Wolfowitz this week made a last-ditch attempt to avert career ruin, namely a hostile finding by the panel investigating his role arranging an unorthodox employment package for a colleague with whom Mr. Wolfowitz was romantically involved. The World Bank fracas is now spreading worldwide, particularly in Latin America. Governments there, especially Venezuela, want to weaken further Washington's influence in the region. At the center of the storm is Shaha Riza, a talented and well-informed person on world development and Arab culture, as she exhibits here on the McLaughlin Group.
The Arab world is actually grappling with two issues, modernization and westernization. And they're grappling even more with reconciling the linkage between modernization and westernization. And this is epitomized in the gender relationship that exists in that part of the world. So on the one hand, you have all of these educated women, and on the other hand, women are not really represented in the labor force.
Question, is there a hex on Wolfowitz, Christian, considering where he was at the Defense Department? Some people think he ruined the U.S. military. Now he's over there ruining not only the United States military, but the World Bank.
I don't think there's a hex on him, but I think he probably will be forced out at the World Bank.
You do?
Yeah, nobody's questioning her expertise. What they're questioning is the fact that he intervened to get her a big fat raise where she makes more money than Condoleezza Rice, and he is romantically involved with her. They live together.
Eleanor, you don't think that politics...
It crosses a line.
You don't think politics and the Iraq War has any role in view of Wolfowitz's participation?
That's a backdrop, but if you're championing anti-corruption measures around the world, you can't be corrupt yourself.
He was given by George Bush the greatest bailout he could possibly, a golden parachute sent over there, 400 grand, makes more than the President of the United States, and he blew it with a stupid, arrogant decision to pay his sweetie more than the Secretary of State to whom she was assigned.
Do you think Wolfowitz is a walking disaster?
Well, I think I editorialized last week saying he ought to be fired because I don't care. I happen to agree with his policies, but we cannot tolerate this kind of petty corruption and simonry, and particularly when the lead policy is to end precisely that all over the world. And the fact that he happens to be a brilliant man doesn't protect him from these petty corruptions.
The question: will Wolfowitz's critics succeed in hounding him from office, Pat Buchanan?
They're going to get him out of there, and he should go.
Eleanor.
Amen.
You can't hound a guilty man out.
What do you think?
He ought to go because he ought to go.
He will be forced to leave, yes.
Wolfowitz is damaged goods. He'll step aside. We'll be right back with predictions.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Grant Thornton, dedicated to serving clients worldwide with a singular passion for the business of accounting. And by Pharma, new medicines, new hope.
SAP is affordable solutions for companies like ours. I have a sneaky feeling the world of high-precision electronic gas pressure gauges is about to change.
Blue sky smiling at me, nothing but blue skies.
Today, there's a fuel that, when paired with advanced diesel engines, will help reduce truck emissions by 90%. And that means bluer skies and cleaner air for all of us. Introducing new ultra-low sulfur diesel. From the people who bring you oil and natural gas. Learn more at energytomorrow.org.
Today, for the first time ever, 90% of seniors have comprehensive prescription drug coverage. Millions of older and disabled Americans with peace of mind, thanks to Medicare's new prescription benefit. That's why leading newspapers say rushing to change Medicare would be a mistake. USA Today tells Congress put on the brakes. The Journal warns it's the last thing patients need. The Post says change is the wrong prescription. Medicare's prescription drug benefit, it's working for seniors.
Predictions, Pat.
Sunday, John, it is Sarki in Paris walking away with the victory.
Tommy Thompson will be the first off the island, gone before the end of summer.
Tony.
After the election in France, the Socialist Party will have one of the worst divisional fights in its history.
Christian.
Rupert Murdoch will succeed in buying the Wall Street Journal.
For how much?
68.
Does that mean anything to the Financial Times?
I think it means that more people should be reading us as a fair and objective source of business information. I wasn't going to volunteer that, John.
I predict that Imus will be back on the air October 1st. Bye-bye.